Thank you very much, including me for this forum. I'm very happy to be together with you. And I'm going to start my presentation with just a short quote. When human rights, the two words, are so rarely found in the world of finance and business, in its literature, in its lexicon. Why? Because it is shameful to mention them. This was yesterday UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid Ra'ad al-Hussein, speech he gave to the governments, reminding him why we have forgotten human rights or we don't like too much it. So that's why if governments are forgetting, and in this forum, 1.5 days, only yesterday evening, Dr. Stordalen gave me this sentence, or two words, human rights. So I'm very happy to be here to talk about a little bit. Also, we talk about a lot of accountabilities. So accountabilities is much more, it's part of the human rights, but not everything of the human rights. We are a little bit larger than accountability. As you know, human rights principles are legal principles, and given as a legal responsibility to the states, and what we call them legally, they are duty bearers, and we citizens are right holders. This almost more than 60 years ago, Universal Human Rights Declaration, several conventions, Convention of the Right to Child, Protection of Women, many legal, important legal entitlements that we have in our hands, why we can't use them to be a good policy tool for right to food and nutrition for all the time. So this is, of course, big philosophical question, and maybe I'm not capable to answer this, but I can easily explain you why it's important to use, besides other policy matters, human rights principles as a kind of approach that give us a good kind of handful policy that we can handle it. First of all, human rights approach many times misunderstood by ordinary citizens, even by governments or even corporations. Human rights, right to food, doesn't mean that we will sit and the governments will feed us. This is not what we talk about, the right to food, but what will happen, government will make an order, establish an order that people either produce or purchase their food that we can feed ourselves in a nutritional manner. So this is not something, because of this is not a charity, this is not a philanthropy, and it is not morality. It's an entitlement. When we talk about entitlement, then we come to accountability. Why entitlement is important? We have to have some kind of procedural rules and to hold governments responsible, because human rights only responsibility for governments. There's a corporate responsibility, will be a little bit later, I'll come, but it is not part of the human rights. This responsibility is very important. Some governments take this very seriously. They put their constitutions, and when they include their constitutions, we have court cases. For instance, Brazil, India, Guatemala, Argentina. These are countries that established their legal system domestically after the international responsibilities, and people will be able to go against their own governments because of the human rights violation. Another issue is important. We have to deal with the human rights approach. We are living in a very unequal world. human rights approach gives us a non-discrimination principle, which means we have to protect people that not altogether inequality. Getting rid of the inequality is part of the human rights principles. It could be gender, race, ethnicity, geography. These are the horizontal, and also vertical, obviously economic and class. So these things should be considered part of the human rights principles when we make our policy in relation to right to food and nutrition. Also, participation is very important. We have to be, as a citizens in a democratic society, have to be part of the decision-making mechanism. You see all the rules and principles having important role, participation into decision-making, but this is not easy, we realize. When you go to remote parts of India, when you ask a woman, when they make this dam project, did they tell you that you're going to be out from your home somewhere else that you cannot feed your children? This is the participation. What we call in human rights principles sovereignty, food sovereignty, which have to be sovereign, how to eat, how to live, and how to make our livelihood. Those are the principles that human rights bring to the table. If we come to corporate responsibility, this is a little bit of gray area because I'm an international law person. I wouldn't say corporations will be completely accountable our common legal principles because corporates are not part of the human rights system in general traditional way. But what is happening because of the most important role of the corporations in our food system, and many of the human rights violations are coming from corporate interests, we have this business and human rights principles that UN Human Rights Council is discussing many years. They are trying to make a convention, but it is a little bit of uphill road. But what is happening, we have two ways to look at the corporate responsibility. Either we're going to make voluntary principles, and the corporations will be responsible, and they will be named and shamed, which is very good. This is our responsibility also as a consumer. Or we're going to make the regulations. Regulation is a very difficult way to go, but so far, some corporations made this kind of responsibility on their own to give citizens or the people or the consumers, not citizens but the consumers, some kind of possibility to correct themselves. So these issues are extremely important. We were talking about stories. As a special rapporteur of the human rights, our role is going to countries, listening people's stories, small villages, remote places, and asking them how to feed your children, what kind of food you are eating. Or many times the answers come, we don't eat every day, every other day we eat, because for instance, sub-Saharan Africa, only maybe 40% of people, they are able to eat every day. They eat every other day. 3 times a day eating, almost impossible. So if you think about why we have to deal with human rights, we have to listen stories, human stories. Thank you very much.